How does it make you feel knowing in 15 to 20 years you will have influenced a whole new generation of writers?
Man, that one, you say in 15 to 20 years, it's already happening, right? There are people who are getting published who were reading me 10 years ago who are now, they were 14 and 15 10 years ago. And, Way of Kings came out 10 years ago, right? And are now getting published and are citing my books as major influences, which is awesome. Makes you feel old. Does make you feel old, but it is really incredible. I like that all art, but I'm part of fantasy, so I say the fantasy genre. Fantasy genre is a dialogue, right? It's a conversation. It's people responding and reacting to other people who are reacting and responding to other people. And that's how culture evolves and changes and becomes different, and how trends begin, and things like that. So I think that's really great. I'm excited by it. I'm happy by it. I am happy that in a lot of ways, I consider, and this might be too arrogant to say this way, right? So forgive me if I phrase it wrong. I consider there to be this line of epic fantasy that started with Grandpa Tolkien and then was all these folks writing in the 80s and 90s that was kind of high on the wonder factor, high on the epic scale, lots of magic and things like this. And I like to and also kind of innately positive, optimistic, I should say, instead of positive, innately optimistic, which is one of the things that drew me to fantasy. There are problems, there are struggles, there are shades of gray, even in Tolkien. But there's an innate sort of optimism in the we can do it. Lord of the Rings is about the little guy who has no experience out in the wide world, but has determination and just a good heart is enough to save the world. And I'm very fond of the fact that fantasy has a lot of different traditions. But when I was trying to break in the George Martin tradition, which I think is pessimistic is the wrong term. I've talked about this before, right? Pessimistic is the wrong term because I don't look at, I look at things that raise a warning flag, and in some ways, those are optimistic too. I've mentioned before that one of my favorite short stories of all time is Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. And this is a very pessimistic story, but pessimistic in this is where we could go wrong. This is where, the darker side of human nature could do terrible things, right? That's a great tradition. I love those books. I think we need both the innately optimistic and the innately pessimistic versions of sci-fi fantasy. But for a while, I could not break in because I was being told that my books were too optimistic. That's because Game of Thrones had hit so big. And for a while, with Game of Thrones, it was really focused on this kind of gritty, darker side of fantasy. And I like that despite that being a major force, that there is room for those of us who follow a slightly different tradition, one might say. Though I know George also is in the lineage of Tolkien, so it's not like I'm trying to make a very wide umbrella that encompasses all of us, and I'm glad there's room for books like mine underneath that umbrella. How about that?